All right. Let's get this out of the way first. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed on Tailboard Talks Firefighter podcast are solely those of the speakers, guests, and host, and do not in any way represent the thoughts or views or opinions of any other employer, partnership, or sponsor. The material and information in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should be used at the listener's discretion. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Tailboard Talks Firefighter podcast. My name is Chris from 4th Shift Firefighter, and if you're watching on YouTube, we're back in the garage today. I like this format I did last week. It was nice to get moving and doing something, kind of made the time pass by a little bit quicker, and for some reason, it's just easier to talk when I'm doing stuff. So my legs are a little tight, my hips are a little tight from a couple training rides I did, so we're going to do a little bit of massage gun while I get into the topic for today, and then I'm doing a stretching sequence that Kurt and I stole from Raph Ruiz, who was also known as like the guy behind CrossFit football back in the day. One of our good friends. So it's a good one to follow along. I'll say what I'm doing, but it's one of those things where if you get a chance to watch it, go ahead because it flows from side to side. It'll be good to see. Before we get going, I'll start this thing. Really banking on the noise canceling microphone today because it's lawn day. So there's some people outside doing some lawn stuff. But go check out my affiliates on the website, 4thshiftfirefighter.com, number 4th shiftfirefighter.com. I have Rescue 1 CBD, 0.000 THC, 0.000, so a lot of zeros, no THC in there. For the purpose of you being able to take CBD and be good for the job. You're not going to fail a drug test because of the CBD. Also, 4th Frontier, they make the X2 heart rate monitoring strap. It's a chest strap, heart rate stuff, tons of metrics, but one of the things it does that nobody else does is gives you lead to EKG. So you can do a live look-in if you're wearing it. You can push real fast and look in. While you're recording your workout, it tracks lead to the whole time, so you can go back and check it out. It's good for working out. I've also used it on shift before, during trainings, and just worn it for 24 hours. It's got 24-hour monitoring if you want it, if you want to activate it for that long. So when you get a call and you see your heart rate spike up, when the tones go off, you can kind of track that better. Let's talk about the stuff today, man. I got a few topics I want to get into. The last one I did was just a little bit ago about mentors and how the fire service needs mentors more than ever. And I got a lot of good feedback on it. And then I put a question box up on Instagram yesterday or 2 days ago or something like that. And it said, all right, what do you want us old guys to know? So 5-year firefighters around there, newer firefighters, what do you want us old guys to know? And I got exactly the answers I was looking for. The best one, two of the best ones. Now, first of all, there was one about cast iron, where a newer firefighter was saying, hey, old guys, wash your cast iron. It's gross, essentially. And I could not agree more with that subject. For some reason, cast iron has made its way into the firehouse. I mean, I know why, and I know a lot of guys like it, but is that cast iron, stainless steel, and the enamel pans are three of the most common things in the firehouse and could not be used incorrectly more often. I mean, the amount of guys scorching those enamel pans because they use above medium heat. It says right on it, don't use heat above medium, and we just rip them apart. Stainless steel, again, this isn't a cooking show, but we're getting into firehouse topics here. You got to get that thing so hot, and it will be nonstick. It is nonstick if you get it hot enough, but we put on like low heat, and then it's just glue, right? And then cast iron, like my nemesis for a number of years in the station I used to be at was cast iron, because it was like, to clean cast iron the way these guys would clean it, you would basically taste the last 7 things that were cooked on that pan. And I would scrub it and get all the chunks and stuff off it because they're like, no, it's seasoning. I'm like, no, it's gross. That's what it is. You can clean your cast iron. You know how to season it. You know how to re-season if you need to. Clean your cast iron, people. But then I got some other answers that were magnificent. And one of them said, basically, be patient with me. Like, if I don't have the mechanical skills that you're trying to instill in me, it's because I don't know them. I didn't learn them at one point, forget them. Right? Like, I'm not ignorant. I am ignorant to them. I was never taught them. You may get someone in their mid-20s, 30s even, who has relatively no mechanical skills. They're okay at mechanical reasoning. I'm pretty sure it's got to be part of the test still, like which way the gears turn. If any old guys are out there, you remember they had 3 gears and one had 6 cogs on it, the next one had 12, the next one had 24, and they said, which way will this one spin and how many revolutions will this one go? That was part of our mechanical reasoning test back in the Stone Age when we were doing Scantron tests still. But so I guess you could pass that, but like
using tools, nah. I'd say the majority of people coming in the fire service now have not used tools, hand tools, even the basic stuff, fundamental stuff, more than they have. So we've had people in the past where they'll be going through their probation, and guys will start getting frustrated of like, this guy doesn't know how to do X, Y, and Z, or he can't just look at this thing and understand how it works. Well, no, because he didn't do that, or he's never done that. And so I've told a few guys, like, listen, when you get this guy, you're not training a firefighter, you're raising a person. And so that's the way it is, man. But that gives us the chance to really, like I said, instill what we think is important and teach them from scratch, which is often much easier than undoing bad habits. When Kurt and I were at the gym, women were incredible at Olympic lifts and weightlifting, like cleans and snatches and all the Olympic stuff, power cleans, hang power cleans. We did a lot of those things, and females were phenomenal at it because they weren't taught improperly in high school. And the people who were worst at it and we had the most struggle with were the guys who were like the weight room heroes in high school, and some overweight football coach was teaching them to do it improperly, and we had to undo those mistakes that they hadn't done in 20 or 30 years. So yeah, sometimes teaching someone from ground zero is way, way easier than undoing the bad teachings they had before. But that's a huge thing that we need to hear. Dude, so many guys working now that are getting near retirement. We'll put in that kind of generational landscape. The guys on your job now that are within 5 years of retirement probably came from the military or some other service or a trade. And it's vastly different than what we have now, right? Hardly anybody comes from the trades. Hardly anybody's building houses and decides to be a fireman. There's no garbage men that are transitioning to the fire service. There's a decent amount of military members, right? But it's just a different world. So we're not getting the same people, guys. We talked about last episode. We're not getting the same people. You can't expect them to have the same amount of skills that you have come in. It is going to take more patience, but the payoff's going to be incredible. Just be patient. It's going to take longer than you think because somebody's using a tool for the first time. If you think they had a fast on-ramp learning extrication stuff and hose handling in the academy, never touching that before. They skipped all the beginning stuff along the way, right? So give them some time. All right, I'm going to jump into this stretching system, routine, flow here thing. It's going to go kind of quick because I don't want to ramble on today, but we're going to start with the butterfly stretch. And immediately, the first thing that comes to mind with butterfly stretches, it's so controversial. It may not seem like it, but again, old people, do you remember at one point, like bouncing your knees was a thing, right? And everybody's like, oh, I'm just going to bounce my knees in the butterfly stretch. And then it was like, do not ever bounce your knees in the butterfly stretch. It's so bad for you. And I was like, okay, I won't bounce my knees anymore. But now we do stuff, instead of doing long static stretching before workout, we do like activation stuff. So you're holding a position for a second or a half a second, then rebounding out of it. So we're kind of bouncing our knees in every form of movement prep we do. So whatever, just bounce your knees. I don't care. Just don't get hurt, right? I say that, I'm like tearing my groin tomorrow at work now. And I'll edit this out if that happens. Another good answer I got was the need for mentors after probation. So somebody wrote and said, I'm 4 years in and I still want a mentor. It's still a need. Like I still have that desire to be mentored, which I thought was a pretty interesting one because I wrote back like, yeah, sometimes, most of the time actually, we just kick you out of the nest after probation. And in reality, depending on what your probation is, you know just enough to get yourself in trouble. And so the mentorship absolutely needs to extend beyond probation. And that's not a new thing for anybody, but it becomes much less formal after probation. Like during probation, you're assigned to somebody, right? And that person is your daddy. Like that's your person, you go to them, you're jumping the chain of command constantly because you're talking directly to your lieutenant. And it should be instilled in there that, yeah, you go through the chain inside your house first, and then you get to the lieutenant. But in reality, your lieutenant's overseeing your progress. So you're going to talk directly to them. Now, I've gone from butterfly to just like a runner's, like a hurdle stretch out here. Important thing with stretching, let's take a little deviation real quick. You got to pay attention to what you're stretching, what the purpose is, okay? If my goal in this runner stretch or hurdle stretch is to grab my toe, that means I'm going to round my back kind of significantly because my hips are pretty tight, right? If my goal in this runner stretch is to stretch out my hips and my hamstrings, the arbitrary goal of reaching your toe has to go out the window. And now we're going to focus on like a tall posture here and make sure that the hinge point is your hips and not your back. So if I'm stretching, and again, this is going to be easier to see on the video, if I'm stretching and my hips stop like 5 degrees past 90, and then I'm nowhere near my toe, and I want to touch my toe, my hips still haven't moved more as I bend my spine to grab my toe. And in fact, the stretch kind of moves from my hamstring up to my upper back in this position for me. So with these stretches, since my hips are tight and my legs are tired from doing training rides, I'm going to focus more on tall posture, and then my range of motion in the stretch is going to be significantly less than it typically is, but the intensity of the stretch where it's supposed to be on my legs is going to be way higher. All right, let's get back to the topic. And you're going to see that through all these stretches here as we go through them. Posture is number one, and then elicits a better stretch where you're supposed to go. Because remember, your back pain probably is coming from your hips and your butt and your legs, not from your pain's coming from your back. There's pain in your back. There's pain in your back because your legs and your hips aren't doing a good enough job being mobile and flexible enough. And remember, whatever motion we don't have in our hips, your lower back is going to compensate and give you that motion when you have to complete a task. Different speech, but we're here on the floor doing stuff, so I might as well talk about it, right? All right, now this is, we're moving over here to this calendar stretch. I'll go over the top again, tall posture and squeeze. All right, if I'm ruining the audio version, I'm sorry. I'm going to get back to the topic. I'm just doing two things at once, but go check out the video. So the mentorship after probation becomes much less formal because now you're with your peers. You're not looked at necessarily as a student anymore in the literal sense of like you can fail probation, you can fail these tests that get you off probation, but you're considered a peer of like, well, that's just another person in a blue shirt now. So they're not going to assign someone to you as a mentor. So that means you might have to seek them out or continuously bounce ideas off someone and not even say like, hey, will you be my mentor? But like, are you cool if I keep coming to you with these questions? Because I got a lot of questions. That period of time after probation is one of the more dangerous times because you feel like an idiot for asking questions because you had a whole year to ask questions. So now if you don't know something and you start asking questions after probation, they're like, well, what did we just do for the past year? Why don't you know this stuff, right? But it's the most important time to ask questions because your comfort level is higher. You're being exposed to a little bit more. You've seen some stuff. You're ready to do some stuff. But that's just like the tip of the iceberg. So actually doing the stuff can be problematic sometimes because you don't have the experience in actually doing stuff. Going into a Z stretch now, so the leg that was over the top comes back to your butt, and this one locks it in. I'm going to turn a little bit. So I'm still on camera. This is going to be for your hip flexor on this side. But that's when it becomes really important. So as a lieutenant, I've done this. After I got promoted, I had talks with a few guys. I'm like, hey, can you be my go-to guy when I have a question for stuff that I don't want to take up the chain? And I had people up the chain that I was like, hey, can I come to you with problems that if it's significant, of course, I'll elevate it. But if it's not, can you just give me some guidance and let me work through it and not take it over and automatically elevate it for me? And I picked the right people, and they were like, yeah, absolutely. We all have people like that, and we all need people like that. As a new person, you can absolutely keep contact with your original lieutenant. So in my department, it's not uncommon for you to get off probation, and then you get moved somewhere. You get moved to a different station, another company where you're needed. You might be on the ambulance or something like that. We're just going the other side with the stretching routine now. So you lose contact with that original officer, right? It's absolutely okay to keep contact with that officer as long as you remember that you do have a new officer now. So this is one of the conflicts early on that I had was I inherited someone or we did shift picks or something. And one of my new ambulance guys had a problem. And he went back to his old lieutenant to handle this problem. And let me know afterwards, like, hey, I had this issue. I went back to so-and-so. He helped me through it, and now it's solved. I said, I'm glad you have the relationship with that guy. I'm glad that you can still bounce ideas off of him, but you need to, I'm your lieutenant now. Not to like make myself self-important or keep that person out of it, but like the end result was the same. We were going to get to the same end result, but I would have handled it differently than his old lieutenant. So it's important to remember that, yes, you have this array of people around you that you can trust and you can consult as mentors, but you still are in a chain of command with your direct superior there, supervisor, or whatever you want to call them, your manager. So it's important to keep that in mind. Keep those old relationships, keep all that stuff working, but don't cut your current chain out of it just because you're comfortable with the old one, right? The best thing you can do is get several different looks at something and several different opinions of people who have been in similar situations or mitigated the same thing before or gotten in trouble before, because we all know different things. We all know the framework of how it's supposed to go in either the discipline chain or the mentoring or counseling or whatever as officers, but we all have a little bit different approaches to it. And I'm sure you've seen that. If you've been in the job for a minute, you can tell that some people, when they get whatever news, that react one way, and some people react a vastly different way. And you may prefer the way someone else would handle it, but you still have the responsibility, the obligation, the expectation that you're going to stay within your chain to handle those problems. Old guys, I'll talk to you again, we can see when someone needs help, right? We can see when someone needs a mentor. You don't have to make it like an official thing. You don't have to see someone struggling or an obvious need of advice or help and be like, okay, I'm taking you under my wing as my protege and we will forever be linked because of this occurrence. Like, no, all you have to do is be like, hey, I see you're struggling with that, or this is a pretty tricky situation. Why don't you let me help you with that? And it can be a totally one-off thing. So don't be afraid, like if you get involved, you're going to be stuck with that person forever. But also it could be worse, right? It could be worse than helping someone through a problem and then them trusting you, God forbid. So I really appreciated that response because we don't hear that a lot, either of those two things. Either please be patient with me, because a lot of times if we're harping on a new person and they're not picking up a skill and they can tell we're getting frustrated, very rarely will they say, hey, just have a little more patience. Usually they'll be like, ah, crap, I'm going to get fired. And they might withdraw a little bit or be a little more guarded and then be super, super nervous to perform that skill. So they're very timid or hesitant, and then that just looks worse, right? So yeah, we do need a little more patience with the incoming classes this time, or these generations. And then the second one of like, yeah, these guys still do want mentors. Like, it may sound cheesy to say if you're one of those people, like, yeah, I still need help through this stuff. Since you are looked at as like a fully functioning firefighter now and this hero, right? But yeah, it's okay to it's absolutely okay to still want and need mentors, and you should want and need mentors after probation, and we should be giving it to you. There's no reason not to. Stop talking about the stretches I was doing because I didn't want to break up that thought, but like I said before I finished it, go back and check. One last thing I want to leave with you guys. I was just thinking about this the other day. Was you ever have a fact in your brain that you can't get rid of? Like every time you think of it frequently, and you think of it during times when it's needed, but then you say it out loud and it goes away forever. It's like it's this thing you had locked in your brain and your conscience, and then consciousness, and then as soon as you use it, it's gone and it evaporates. I'm afraid that's going to happen with this, but when the kids were learning to eat on their own, and yes, Katie still chops up their grapes even though they're 5 and 3. I read a thing that said kids are less likely to choke on food if they're the ones putting it in their own mouth. If you put food in your kid's mouth, they have a higher chance of choking than if you put it in their hand and they put it in their mouth. And it has something to do with the awareness of it, right? If they're just going about their thing, screwing around on the table and doing whatever, and you shove food in their mouth, it's just something that is happening to them. It's just this object that they have now. If they take it and they put it in, now there's like an awareness to the subject, and they're much less likely to choke on it. And I use that as a lieutenant because we have a lot of tasks that I don't love doing. I understand the need for them, and they get done, like hose testing, inspections, little stuff like that, spring cleaning, the whiny stuff, right? It's nothing big. It doesn't take that much time, but it's a pain. I just don't want to do those things. I would be totally cool if we had like a 50-person inspection bureau and all we had to go do was pre-plan spots and like look at cool stuff and figure out ways to make things work. I would do that all day long. But as soon as you add an inspection form into it, I lose interest in it. So I use that idea, though, the baby choking idea or not choking idea, with my crew in the form of giving them a choice, like, what thing do you want to eat today that you don't want? And by doing that, by giving them the choice, by giving them the object, I did this the other day. So we have to do X number of re-inspections today. We have training in the afternoon. We can either go out early this morning when it's not as hot and do our re-inspects, then come back, have lunch, and then go back out again for training. Or we can leave right after lunch at 1 o'clock, go do our re-inspects, get through them quickly, and then go do our training with the department. I'm giving that to them. I say, you guys pick. You decide what you want to eat and how you want to eat it. And if I give it to you and I give you the ability to put it in your mouth, you might not choke on it, right? And they said, no, let's just go do them now. We'll get them out. We'll get them done. We'll have an hour off in the morning. And then we have an hour off before training. So that works out much better for us because I want to cook this meal today. I said, cool. If I just shove it in, right? I have these two things that you don't want to eat. I have these two big grapes here, and I'm just going to give them to you. Your crew has a chance of choking and creating problems for you and spitting them out. So take that for what it's worth. I see a lot of profound thinkers on social media, on Instagram, relaying everything back, these tiny little lessons, relaying that and making this elaborate, profound statement about leadership and your livelihood and whatever, making big stretches, right? And that's a stretch, the one I just said, but it makes sense to me. If you need something done and you're relying on your people to do it, give them the say in how, or at least when it's going to get done, and they're less likely to choke and create problems for you, okay? I put up another caption earlier, and I think this is just a fun point to put in. I could probably make a whole episode about this, but I used it as a caption on a video. I can't remember which video. I used to work for a guy that would speak in code, man, and it drove me crazy. This goes back to one of those leadership principles of communication and just clarity, right? It drove me crazy because he was the type of guy, great leader, but you had to know, it's the video about handling me and how Kurt and Mickey tell guys how to handle me. And two stories kind of lead me to believe that happens. The first one was this one, where I had this guy that used to talk in code. And if he walked by something and he made mention of it, that meant that's your task now and you better fix whatever I just mentioned. If he walked by and said, man, that axe is dirty, that meant that every tool on the rig needed to be polished. If he said, hey, if you get a chance today, could you go do this? That meant drop what you're doing immediately and go do it. It was so frustrating until I figured out that's what his code was, right? After that, I knew exactly what those codes were. I wish he could have just said, hey, go do this now. I don't think he was trying to be overly soft or kind with it. He wasn't afraid to tell us to do stuff. I think he didn't want to have a million things that he needed to micromanage us on, and that was his way of conveying, like, I want you to do this, but I'm not going to micromanage you, even though I am. But after you learn the rules and you learn how this guy talks and communicates, that takes a lot of frustration out of it. If nothing else, he was consistent, which is the number one gripe I've heard with people and their bosses, the inconsistency. One day you come in and you're barking orders. Next day you come in and you can't make a decision. Next day you're a hothead. Next day you're a pushover. Next day the inmates are running the asylum. The inconsistency is where people have problems. So if you're a leader, if you're promoted, if you're an officer, if you're a paramedic in charge of anything, people will get along with your attitude as long as they know what attitude you have. If you're going to keep switching it up, that's when they're going to have problems. So just be you, right? This is one of the things going back. We just stole that stretching sequence from Raph. He sat us down in a coaching seminar and he said, whatever kind of coach you are, just be that coach. If you're a yeller, yell. If you're a numbers guy, do your numbers. If you're an overanalyzer, overanalyze. If you need to get your hands dirty and like run drills and show them off before people do them, do that. But be what you are. Don't try to be something else. If you come in here and you're a yeller and all of a sudden you're trying to do numbers and play soft on people, they're going to see right through it. And I got the same speech during some tryouts for junior hockey. They said, do not try to reinvent yourself in this camp. If you're a fighter, fight. If you're a goal scorer, score goals. If you're a defenseman, you stay at home, stay at home. He said, because we invited people who do their things very well. So if you try to do someone else's thing in the next 3 days, you're going to get destroyed and we're not going to bring you on the team. So be consistent. I don't mean to get too far off topic with that stuff, but those are two lessons from that. The second story about handling people is we have a couple policies about high-speed roadways in my city. And you can take an expressway from one corner of our city to the other and skip over the entire thing. And it's only a problem because in that time, you're skipping over 4 different districts to get back to yours. So if a call comes in and you're on the expressway, you might be 100 yards away from somebody that really needs help, but you're not able to respond to them. And now they have to wait for the out of district or in district ambulance to go minutes and minutes and minutes away when you could have been there very quickly. It's a chance, right? It's a numbers game. It's a roll the dice if that's ever going to happen or not. So we have these things that say, hey, if you're returning from the hospital, returning from calls out of your district, avoid the expressway. We want you to go through town because we want you to be available for people if they happen to call and you're nearby. So I had a new paramedic in charge, and we went across town for a call for a fire alarm, and we took the engine back through town, and he jumped on the expressway to get back to our station. And we got back, and I said, hey, don't do that, blah, blah, blah. And he said, oh, I thought that was just for coming home from the hospital. I said, no, it's kind of for everything because they want you to be available. And he goes, well, I thought the memo said from the hospital, don't you take the expressway to get back home. I said, it did say that in there, but it also says the spirit of this policy, blah, 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 or the reason we're doing this is for this reason, so it falls under. And he said, okay, well, maybe we can print that out and look at that later. I said, you can if you want to, but we don't need to train on this. I'm just telling you, don't do that again. And he came back again and tried to justify it again. And just by chance, because this was years ago, I was working with Kurt, and Kurt was in the next room, and Kurt yelled, just tell him thanks and shut up and get out of his office. And I started laughing because I'm like, dude, that's all you have to do. Like, what are the chances? And I was farmed out to that station for that day. So I never worked with that crew. I rarely ever saw this person. What are the chances that I'll be working here again on the engine and you'll be on the ambulance and we'll go across town to that very specific fire alarm that rarely ever happens. And this will happen again. Just say, yeah, I got it. Thanks. No problem. You can even lie to me and I'll never know. You can say, yeah, no problem. I'll never do that again. And then do it next day and I'll never see it. But in my mind, I did my job and you accepted it. In your mind, whatever's going on there is going on. But Kurt knows that a lot of times the best thing to say to me is like, okay, cool, thanks. Or yeah, I got it. Or I'll work on that. Or okay, thanks for bringing that to my attention. And then getting out of the conversation. When you start to go into a tit for tat thing, it just blows up. And that's just kind of the personality of our stations, of our department, and with me specifically. But that guy at some point, for some reason, figured out that he won an argument one time by continuously chirping back. Kurt knows that's the wrong thing to do. So Kurt informally recommended that he just remove himself from the conversation. So you got to know how to handle people, right? You got to know who you're talking to. You got to know when you're wrong, and you got to know when to withdraw. There's an old song about playing cards or something like that. But that's a huge lesson in the fire service, right? Knowing when to withdraw and knowing when to say, okay, cool, thanks. Or knowing when to say, yep, I screwed that one up. I know I'm going to have to do some training on that. So I'm going to get on it preemptively. And I know you're going to give me stuff to train on. So let's just do it. Instead of fighting to the hilt that you weren't wrong, or you're not understanding what I did, or there's a misconception, or obviously you don't know the full story. Sometimes, dude, it's just easier to eat it, fall on your sword, get out of the conversation, get out of the situation. And on the positive side, this is something I tell my guys, even if you didn't screw up that bad and the perception is you did, and you have to go through some training to make people happy, that is a freebie on your eval. On your year-end evaluation, that's a gimme. I write that one down. I say, he had this issue, he did the training required, he showed 100% improvement, and it has not been an issue since. That's an easy A+ on your eval. So yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it may feel unjustified, or like, no, I wasn't that wrong. Like, they don't understand. I did not make this big of a mistake, and they're blowing out of proportion. Maybe they are. The social and political capital you're going to burn trying to prove them that you're right, may not be worth it in the end. It may be a much better investment in your future to defend yourself as best you can, if needed, but just eat it, correct it, show improvement, show you're working on it, and move on. That sounds counterintuitive. It sounds like you're just rolling over and getting worked. It sounds like you're giving up or selling yourself out. It's not. It's showing that you're mature enough that you understand there's a situation going on and you understand the best way to handle it that won't create problems for you in the future. And I want to end it there. Before I get another thought in my head, before I go on another tangent, another rambling fest, I'm all done. All right. So if you want more stretching routines like this, if you're watching, check it out. Cool. Thanks. Awesome. I'll let you know I got more of them. Send me a message. Send me some questions. I really like talking to the new firefighters in this thing because lessons always come out that are applicable to new firefighters, but also the old guys too, right? We're all working together. And it's pretty awesome. Maybe tomorrow, I know I'm on a different crew tomorrow, but I'll take a picture of my normal crew and the age ranges in there. And if you think there isn't some maneuvering needed in that crew with how to handle things, it's pretty awesome. So, all right, guys, thanks for checking out. Thanks for listening if you're listening to the audio. Thanks for watching if you're watching on YouTube. Go to 4th Shift Firefighter, 4thshiftfirefighter.com. I got affiliates and discount codes and all kinds of stuff on there. Talk to you guys soon. Keep being a 4th Shift Firefighter, and let's all work on being more capable and durable on the job and away from it. See ya.